Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man working as a climatologist gets a report of a place with weird weather. So, what's the forecast there? Because here, it is snowing feathers.
As a climatologist, I spend most of my days just screaming into the void. One academic paper at a time, I start to feel more and more like a doomsday prophet. The end is nigh, we yell from the proverbial rooftops. But honestly, I'm as sick of doing that as you are listening to it. Don't get me wrong, I love my job. I get to see and understand things that others usually take for granted. To see the machinations of the planet come together to explain an unpredictable outcome. To face the storm and say, yeah, I get it. We're learning the language of Mother Nature, her screams, tantrums, agony, and relief. But earlier this year, I was sent to study something new and different. I wouldn't go as far as to say we're bound to the whims of an eccentric millionaire, but at the same time, it wouldn't be too far from the truth. Most of our collective projects are privately funded. Most of the time, we're free to do whatever we please, as long as we make our parent company look good. But sometimes they point us in a direction and ask us to go fetch. We're basically academics on retainer, ready to drop our projects at a moment's notice to service our masters. Yeah, I don't like that metaphor either. One day an article dropped in my inbox. It was sensationalist nonsense. No more than 400 words about fishermen coming back from the sea covered in feathers. They called it feather snow, and they swore to its authenticity, claiming it usually came around every 2 weeks or so. The article played it off as a joke, but I wasn't laughing. I could see who sent it to us, our parent company. We had a short staff meeting, and it turned out everyone had been sent the same article. Someone was heading southeast of Portsmouth to debunk it. Well, it turns out that someone was me. I got set up at a small bed and breakfast. All cynicism aside, the people of New Hampshire are wonderful. They were welcoming and understanding, and without a hint of mean spirit. I felt so open about what I was doing there that I told anyone who asked, and I got very honest responses. Apparently, the feathers now was a known phenomenon that dated back to the 80s. It was more frequent nowadays, but there were articles way back speaking of the same thing. Fishermen who'd gotten caught in it weren't locals, and had called the papers. That resulted in the article we'd seen. The locals knew better. This type of thing happened every now and then. Once I got to talking with the local fishermen, it was made apparent that feathers now was a real thing. Very real. They planned around it, and they avoided it when they could. They'd pull up their nets early and reposition their boats to avoid it. 4 different families of fishermen showed me feathers from the previous falls that they'd saved in jars, and I was allowed to take some home for testing. It dawned on me that these were real people, dealing with real consequences. This wasn't some sensationalist nonsense. I sent the feathers in for testing with some of my colleagues. The results were back within a couple of days. 4 different types of gulls, great black-backed, laughing Mew and Franklins, as well as a couple of Forster's tern. Pretty common New Hampshire seaside birds. These weren't some fake duck feathers saved up in a jar just for fun. These were actual, real feathers. Why would they just come falling out of the sky and so frequently? I managed to get a hold of a captain, willing to take me out to sea at the next feather snow. Captain Willard Morrow and his son Robert. They also had 2 fishermen who worked for them. But there was no need to bring them along just to witness the feather snow. Instead, the 3 of us were going alone. I brought all kinds of equipment. I was going to measure everything from cloud density to humidity to freaking radon. I just brought whatever I could. Before I left my room, I also brought along my lucky binoculars. Few things can be as valuable as seeing something up close with your own eyes. And these binoculars had been with me for a long time. Hell, they'd helped me spot the origin point of a tornado once. It It was a Sunday afternoon when we pulled up the anchor and set out to sea. Not too far out, but far enough that the coastline started to look like a thread. I double-checked my equipment, and Willard was doing the same. His boat was tried and tested, but all electronics were no more than a couple of years old. Just as I was making sure I'd capture everything, he was making sure we were getting back to land. His son, Robert, spent most of his time texting and counting the minutes. Feathers now wasn't something new and exciting to these people. Around 6 p.m., we saw the first signs. Clouds were gathering, but they were spread thin and white. When it rains, clouds turn black. These were classic cirrus clouds, not something you associate with bad weather or storms. Strong winds, perhaps. I was triple-checking my equipment when Robert poked his head out of the cabin window. He pointed just off the side of the boat. See? There's one. He was right. There was a feather there. How hadn't I noticed it? Then I saw it. Millions of feathers falling in unison, a blanket spread out for miles, tumbling through the air just a couple of feet of distance between them. White feathers calmly touching the ocean. A few of them landed on me, and the boat got covered in them. Robert sighed. He was probably going to have to hose the deck off once we got back to land. There it is, said Willard. Like clockwork. Feathers now. What do you think? No idea, I said, shaking my head. How can it... Every 2 weeks? Yous believe us now? We're not just telling stories anymore? Catching a feather between my fingers, I just stared in disbelief. Of course, I'd thought they were lying. I'd thought it for days, but this was real. This was something you could hold in your hand. Willard just laughed. When I got back to my room, I started trying to make sense of the data. There had been no increase in humidity. It was as if 1 second there was nothing, then there were feathers. Usually I could tell by the equipment readings when something happened, but there was no cutoff point. There was not a single point where I could say, look, this is where the feathers started to fall. There was nothing like that. They tumbled down, and that was it. Full stop. I talked to my boss about it, explaining that we basically had nothing to go on. He didn't care for it. Either I made something out of this or I didn't. I could debunk it or explain it. There was no middle ground. Now that I'd seen it and taken pictures, there was no question of it anymore. It was authentic, but odd. That was the best way to describe it. Odd. I spent a couple of days just making up a new plan. I spent my nights at the local pub watching football. Go Wildcats, I guess. And taking long walks. I didn't know how to proceed. There are no rule books for this type of thing. I met Willard and his 2 fishermen at the pub one night. They recommended I talk to a guy named Humphrey, or Hump, and they gave me a number. He was a pilot of a small plane used for displaying banners and messages, a skywriter of sorts. He was a retiree who ran a private pilot course for folks around the area, and he was a bit of a local celebrity. You should see what's going on in the clouds, Willard suggested, and if you're going up, you want Hump to pilot the damn thing. It wasn't a bad idea, and it earned them a couple of beers. Go Wildcats. I'm not afraid of heights, and I'm not afraid of flying, but this time, I was. I got in touch with Hump, and we decided to go up during the next feather snow. He didn't mind. The winds were usually mild, and he had a proposal to help out with anyway. As long as I promised to help him with the lettering, he would help me out, free of charge. How could I say no? He brought me out to this tiny airstrip on the outskirts of town. There was barely any asphalt on the road there, but the strip itself was immaculate. It was privately owned, and Hump took great care of it. As I got there, he was hosing off the plane. We shook hands, had a few laughs, and I helped him with the letters. "Marry me, Jocelyn," it said in bold red letters. When it was time to go, I had to cram myself into the back seat of the plane. There were only 2 seats, and I couldn't bring much equipment. I settled for my camera and my binoculars. Hump, being of a slightly larger than average frame, barely fit in the front seat. Still, he was as used to flying as I was to walking. I know I shouldn't have felt safe in that tiny seat, but there wasn't a hint of insecurity in anything he said. If anything, it was going to be fun. Good old Hump. Cirrus clouds usually rest at about 5,000 to 6,000 meters, and we were going well beyond 8,000. There would be plenty of opportunity for me to see what was going on for myself. Hump even agreed to stay lower than usual. He was, truth be told, a little questioning about why we were going out. Not because he was afraid, but because he didn't get the point. There was nothing out there. Sure, feather snow was weird, but it wasn't malicious. There wasn't a single shipwreck out there because of it. It was too close to shore. But we took to the skies. Man, feeling that big piece of metal lift from the earth is something I'll never get used to. It is one thing to be on a commercial flight, but this thing was tiny. Every twist and turn registered instantly in my stomach, and when Hump started joking about a barrel roll, I nearly gagged. It wasn't the kind of thing you get used to. You either love it instantly or hate it for the rest of your life. I was clearly in the latter category. We circled around town a couple of times, 4 in total. Hump got a text message confirming they'd seen the proposal, and he turned the plane around. I just wanted it to be over. I got a hand cramp from steadying myself, and my ears were ringing from the sound of the propeller. Still, I'm a professional. I wanted to take some pictures and see what was going on. Once we started seeing the cirrus clouds, I got my camera out. It helped to watch the world through a lens. It made it seem less real. I took a few pictures, but wasn't seeing anything in particular. I leaned back to regain my composure when Hump spoke up. "Hey, you seen this?" he asked. "That's a lot of birds." I looked back down as Hump circled the area. He was right. It was a whole lot of birds. Hundreds, maybe thousands. More than there should be. They were circling a particularly thick part of the cloud cover. Hump took us down to get a better view, and I photographed at least a dozen different species, all flying in a circular formation like a ring in the sky. It would have been impossible to see them from the ground. They were hidden by the clouds. They were all of different white plumages, and they kept to a certain part of the sky where the clouds obscured them. "You seeing this?" he repeated. "What are they doing?" "Same as us," I laughed. "Either sightseeing or fishing." I brought out my binoculars to get a better look. Then I saw it. In the center of the bird ring, where the clouds were the thickest, there was a black spot. It hadn't been there a few seconds ago. A big circle-like shape. I photographed it, putting my camera on max zoom. What happened next will haunt me. A white circle appeared inside the black spot. As Hump took us up, I realized I was staring at an eye. An eye the length of 2 fishing boats. In the literal blink of an eye, thousands of birds just disappeared. Their bodies were gone, leaving only feathers behind. Feathers that slowly wafted down like snow. Then, the eye turned its attention to us. I could see a faint outline in the clouds, like a shimmering celestial flatfish, too large to comprehend. I started hyperventilating, burying my head between my knees, staring into myself instead of out the window. I pounded the back of Hump's seat, stammering to take us away. Nothing happened. I forced myself to look up, only to see the front seat empty. Nothing but the clothes remained of Hump as the plane started to turn, fast. What happened next were the most panicked seconds of my life. Trying to wrap my head around what I'd seen, trying to pull the flight stick up, trying to get loose and climb into the front seat, all while plummeting towards the open ocean. I sat on Hump's warm clothes as the ocean came rushing towards me. I don't know how I survived. The crash was devastating. I remember crawling out of a wreckage, being cut by hot metal, leaning against a life preserver. There was an intense cold, followed by a pleasant warmth. I threw up at least 3 times, and I passed out just as something shone a light in my face. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital. The crash was pretty big local news, but that's all it was. No mentions of eyes in the sky, no mentions of the feather snow. No, apparently Hump was a known alcoholic who did sightseeing flights without a license. My name was spared from the articles, but there were plenty of mentions of an implied rich snob who got his comeuppance. I haven't been back since, and my physical therapy is progressing slower than it should. It feels like that thing is still out there, looking for me. It has seen me, and now it wants to know where I went. It wants to do something with me. The entire me, not just my body. It wants to take me away, leaving nothing but a shell behind. My feathers, if you will. There have been no more reports of feathers now outside the coast southeast of Portsmouth. Apparently it stopped after Hump disappeared. But just last night, as I was struggling to sleep, I saw it. Clear as day, a single white feather dancing towards the ground. I think it's here.